Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Well, we're going to get right into it today, talking about the two teams that we talk about the most, Celtics and the Lakers, as they were both active last night. We're also going to talk about the first somewhat interesting trade of the NBA season and talk a little bit about an injury to a star player. But Sap, our two favorite teams were both in action last night, different results. Celtics won, equaling their biggest win streak of the season at 3. And the Lakers lost to the Sacramento Kings. The Lakers have been playing pretty well recently, and then they ran into a Russell Westbrook 2 of 14 shooting performance last night.
Yeah, which is almost like an improvement for Russell Westbrook. Interestingly enough, so far this month in 5 games, Jed, he's averaging 29% from the floor. He's 0 for 12 from 3 this month. So, I mean, he's arguably even worse than normal. That's how bad he's been. And then he comes into the press
conference.
Still
in the early part of the month.
It's still early in the month. Yeah, it's only the 13th of the month, so we still got a couple weeks left. I mean, he could only get worse, actually. I mean, he may actually get worse over the next 7 or 8 games, because this is what he is. And this isn't that far off. Well, it's far enough off from his career percentage, but he's never been a good shooter. When he was winning league MVP, never a great 3-point shooter, not a great, perimeter shooter, to say the least. And then I was kidding last week about his vision. And again, I'm a person who's dealing with glaucoma, so I can make fun of people's vision. I'm too good myself, but he shows up to the press conference wearing the thickest glasses I've ever seen, and I'm like, does he wear contact lenses? And if he does, do they really work? I mean, that has to be some sort of question. I don't know who's going to ask that question to Russell Westbrook, because he normally looks like he's going to bite someone's head off when someone asks him a question anyway. And he's also now in a different situation, playing in LA as opposed to, say, Oklahoma City, where they just fawned over him. Then he went to Houston, where it was more James Harden's team, and then to the Wizards, who no one really cares about. This is the team he grew up loving. He's playing for. I think he wants to do well, but 29% from the floor this month, and yet to hit a 3-pointer this month, 0 for 12. I mean, that's a disaster, but that's what the Lakers are. Meanwhile, LeBron's playing at a ridiculously high level. I am convinced now that I think LeBron, obviously, a big goal of his is to win another championship. I don't think he's doing it this year with this team, but he's going to, at some point, catch and surpass Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Probably the next year as the league's all-time leading scorer. I also think a feather in his cap could be leading the league in scoring. I know most people would say, who cares? But to lead the league in scoring in your 19th year at the age of 37 would be quite an accomplishment. And right now he's about a half a point per game behind Kevin Durant. And the more that Kyrie Irving plays, I think Durant's average will go down. I could see LeBron leading the league in scoring, which would be pretty remarkable for a guy that age.
Yeah, that's crazy. Sap, let me ask you this. Of those 3 things, winning a championship, passing Kareem's scoring record, and leading the league in scoring in a given year, get into LeBron's head. Realistically, how do you think he ranks those 3?
Realistically, I think winning a championship right now almost seems out of the question. The only thing that may
But do you think that's more important to him than the scoring thing at this point?
Of course it is. It has to be. Absolutely. Because the only thing that people talk about is championships. And I think he's the greatest player of all time. But the people who say Jordan's the greatest of all time, their thing is Jordan won 6 championships. LeBron's won 4. Now, if LeBron can get to 5, he'll have as many as Magic and Kobe and Duncan. And, the discussion to say that he's the greatest player ever gets a little bit closer to other people, not me. I think he is the greatest player ever. But yeah, then you become the all-time leading scorer, and then you win a scoring title at the age of 37. I mean, Jordan at the age of 37 was out of the league, came back with Washington for a couple of years, and was still a pretty good player. I mean, the guy averaged 20 a game at like 40 years old. Right. But he wasn't what LeBron is right now. And LeBron's got a lot of mileage too, playing consecutive seasons. Like Jordan took 2 years off, played 3, took another 3 off, came back. So I would think that in terms of being realistic, I think it's a done deal that he's going to surpass Kareem. I mean, if he just continues to score even 25 a game, he'll do it like next March. I think that's going to happen. Leading the league in scoring right now, he's a little bit ahead of Giannis for second, and he's a little behind Kevin Durant for first. And look, Durant and Giannis have legitimate championship aspirations with the teams they're playing on. I mean, LeBron, I wouldn't say could be like Curry last year. No one thought the Golden State Warriors were going to go anywhere last year. They got into the play-in tournament and lost 2 games. They didn't even make the playoffs, and yet Steph led the league in scoring and was second or third in MVP voting, which is pretty amazing. That's why when I say LeBron's a top 4 or 5 MVP candidate, people say, "Oh, it can't be. He's playing on a 500 team." So I think the most realistic thing is surpassing Kareem. I think that's a done deal. Leading the league in scoring, I think he can do it because we know Durant's not a guy who forces it, and especially if Kyrie's playing half the games, maybe a few fewer shots for Kevin Durant can bring his scoring down. And Giannis, I think he could score at will as well. But those guys are playing on teams that are true contenders at this point. So, and then the least real thing is winning a championship because they're 21-21, same as the Celtics. I mean, they're both mediocre teams. I mean, 21-21 is by definition mediocre, right? So the Lakers and Celtics are right there together. The one thing the Lakers do have is they do have LeBron James, but they also have Anthony Davis, who should be back sometime in February. Now, what type of shape is he going to be in? How's he going to play? That's a big question mark. But right now, the thing that's dragging down the LA Lakers is Russell Westbrook. He absolutely sucks. I mean, there's no other way to describe how he's played this year. I mean, he's close to averaging a triple-double, which I think he could do in his sleep, but he's never impacted winning, even with the triple-doubles, and he's now impacting losing because he can't shoot, and he still continues to take shots and turn the ball over and do all of these bad things that really, really hurt the Lakers.
Yeah, it must be I mean, I can't say that I watch all the Lakers games. I know you watch more than I do. I would imagine it's very frustrating to see him just constantly launching up bricks. Bricks is a nice word for it. But, Sap, does LeBron bear some responsibility, I think, for kind of botching this in terms of he's the guy who said, bring in Russell Westbrook.
Yep, absolutely.
How much better would they be right now if they had Buddy Hield? Or, DeMar DeRozan said he freaking wanted to go there. He thought he was going there. And, I mean, DeMar DeRozan, you could put him in the top 5 MVP consideration this year as well. I mean, I think if they had DeRozan instead of Westbrook, they'd be certainly they'd be much more strong championship contenders. And I would imagine their record would be far better.
Didn't have Russell Westbrook, they'd be better. Not even having anybody replace him. Just take him out of the equation. I think they'd be better. Now, if Buddy Hield would have been a nice selection because he's a really good 3-point shooter, and that's what you need to surround LeBron with. DeMar DeRozan would be a home run, right? And he's from LA. He wanted to go there. And his contract with the Bulls was not over the top. I think it was 4 years, $92 million, which is $23 million a year, which is less than what they're paying Russell by $15 to $18 million. And Rosen, who's always been an efficient scorer, decent defender, not a great defender, I think he would have fit in perfectly. He's become a really good 3-point shooter. Just think about the opportunities he's had with LeBron. Now, he's getting a lot of opportunities in Chicago because of Lonzo Ball. When you play with a 4-point guard, all of a sudden Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan are playing at a higher level, which I know we're going to talk about the Celtics shortly, that Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown don't play with a pure point guard, so they have to grow. DeRozan and Zach LaVine can feed off of Lonzo Ball. So, yeah, I mean, any of those moves would have been better. Just not even making the trade for Russell Westbrook would have made sense because I would think Kyle Kuzma would, although he never really hit it off with LeBron, but, he'd be better. KCP was a guy who was a pretty key contributor to the championship. Maybe Montrezl Harrell would have figured it out a little bit. Those 3 guys have played pretty well in Washington, right? I mean, yeah. I mean, Russell Westbrook's been a net negative. That's how bad he's been. I mean, it's a disaster.
Was this an ego thing for LeBron to bring in Westbrook and saying, I can win with this guy, whereas some of my my peers haven't been able to?
Absolutely. We said that months ago, that it was a kind of a vanity project. Like, look, I know Durant couldn't win with him, couldn't get out of Oklahoma City. Enough to join Steph Curry in Golden State. Harden couldn't win with him. Bradley Beal couldn't win with him. I'm going to win with him. And this could be like the icing on the cake of my career. I won a championship. Pretty amazing. And it's not going to happen because this is who he is. And now it's just he's 33. So the athleticism isn't quite there. So you see the numbers go down. And now he's playing with more pressure because there's more eyes watching the LA Lakers than were Washington or Oklahoma City or, Houston. He's playing for the Lakers. This is still the biggest franchise in the NBA. They're on national TV all the time. Their press conferences will lead shows like Get Up or First Take or what have you. and he's going to, feel a lot of pressure here. And he seems to be distracted as well. And personally, I like him. I do. I think he's a fascinating guy. He's getting into like the documentary film business. I know he's owning car dealerships, but it seems like he's just like lost his focus on what's the most important thing, which is still basketball. And it's just, like a lot of players, it's more about branding than playing at the highest level. And look, the guy leads the league in minutes played. I mean, that's pretty amazing at 33, the way he plays. But at some point, as I said a couple of weeks ago, Jed, he's the guy that keeps showing up at work that you kind of wish didn't show up every day because he kind of gets in the way and screws things up, right? It's like, oh, Charlie's back in today. Does this guy ever call in sick? That we've always had those. We've all had guys like that in our work history. It was like, oh, he's never out, this guy. I wish he'd maybe go on vacation or call in sick a few days to give us a break, because he's the guy that's just, kind of like a bull in the china shop. So that's a major problem, but they can't move him. Who's going to take him?
No. I mean, I would really start to think there was some collusion in the NBA if somebody takes on his contract. Mm-hmm. I just don't see, to me, he's he should be the most untradeable contract in the league.
Yeah, I mean, is there a team out there that would need Russell Westbrook to maybe sell tickets? Because he's still a star, right? And he's got a dynamic personality, and he does have a dynamic game if you're really not paying attention to it.
I don't think you're selling enough tickets to negate the contract, though.
That's the other thing, right? Exactly. And again, you move contracts around, and it becomes Lakers eat part of the contract. No, this is a disaster. He's got 1 year left after this. They're just going to have to figure out how to deal with him. And
yeah, they are. I don't see how they could possibly move it.
No, they can't move it. And all of a sudden, is Russell Westbrook going to wake up one day and go, you know what? I'm going to shoot less. I'm going to defend better. I'm not going to worry about my stats. I'm going to fit into the team. No,
the guy's what he is.
Yeah, exactly. When guys are that successful, not going to change. And he's obviously had a successful career. The man was an MVP. He's on the 75th anniversary All 75 team. I mean, that's he belongs on there. Yeah. But yeah, he's not all of a sudden going to show up, the next game and say, yeah, I finally figured this out. I'm going to be a role player and do the best I can. I give a player like Carmelo Anthony some credit. He's kind of like reinvented himself, right? He's become pretty much a perimeter shooter, knows what he can and can't do. And
but it took him being out of the league, Sap, right? I mean,
forever, right? And
that's why he reinvented himself.
Exactly.
Because
yeah,
he wasn't willing to do it until he was like, oh, well, maybe I have to do this if I want to be gainfully employed anymore.
No, that's a great point, Jed. And, one of the guys who's, I think the fifth greatest player in the history of the sport is Will Chamberlain. And Will Chamberlain was the most dominant scorer ever. I mean, the numbers are really, and the rebounding numbers are silly. But late in his career, when he got to the Lakers, he finally did win a championship. And along the way, he led the league in assists one year, and he became like more of a defensive force. Like, I remember when I first started watching basketball was in the early 70s, and I'm watching Will Chamberlain. I'm like, how did this guy score 50 points per game? He doesn't really do much on offense now. Well, he developed his game later in his career because he realized he wasn't the athlete he was back in the 60s when he was dominant. So he kind of, he evolved. And that's what a great player can do. But I just don't see Russell Westbrook doing that.
Yeah, my last note about the Lakers, Sap, and you can comment on this if you want, is that I think that LeBron I don't even think that this was the case throughout most of his career, especially pre-Lakers. He made a living, not just being a great basketball player, but making marginal players become relevant players, like, right. Boobie Gibson, Sasha Pavlovich, Mario Chalmers, those type of guys. He hasn't been able to do that so much with the Lakers, especially these past two seasons. And I wonder if he has the ability to do that anymore, to make these marginal players better anymore, or if he's just focused on like, I just don't believe in the talent in this team. I have to go out and try to score 30 plus a game, and I can't really be focused on making players better anymore.
He's still averaging 7 assists per game, and think about what he would be averaging if he had guys who could make shots. I mean, I'm sure that Russell Westbrook brings down everyone's assist.
Yeah, but assists are hollow, right? If Westbrook's averaging 10,
sure, yeah, they can be
making players better.
He's a little over 8. No, Westbrook. He also throws in 4.5. Turnovers a game as well, does right. Westbrook. Yeah, it's again, as you get older, it becomes more difficult because I think where LeBron isn't what he used to be, obviously, is on the defensive end of the floor. And that's why I always put he and Michael as the two greatest players ever, because they also were just forces on the defensive end. And LeBron's 37, a lot of mileage. he's a big man as well, but now he's playing center, which I think is a good thing for him because it kind of gives him a little bit of break defensively, and also you can kind of set the defense up from under the basket, almost like a free safety in football. But he can't make guys better the way he used to. And again, they may be because of the roster construction. Like I think he could still pass the ball at a level that's the best in the league, but now you need guys to make shots, right? So that's what we've always surrounded him with, and right now the Lakers don't have that. They're a terrible three-point shooting team. Not as bad as the Celtics are as a three-point shooting team, but nonetheless a pretty poor three-point shooting team. And a lot of that is Westbrook, but even other players on the roster.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting note because, like I said, more than anybody I can really remember, at least in my era of watching basketball, Sap, he took guys who were borderline NBA players and made them household names. Like, there's no real reason I should know who the hell Sasha Pavlovich or Boobie Gibson are, but
right,
I do.
Yep,
because of LeBron. I mean, he earned those guys
because of LeBron.
He earned those guys a living. And frankly, as we both think James Jones is doing a good job as the GM of Phoenix, he wouldn't have that job without LeBron.
No. I mean, I've said this before about Tom Brady. He's put a lot of coaches' kids through private schools, whether it be Charlie Weiss, who made a lot of money when he went to Notre Dame. And what did he do at Notre Dame? But he was Brady's defensive coordinator. Josh McDaniels the same way. I mean, everybody seems to love him, but Bill O'Brien, just, a bunch of players, owe Tom Brady a certain amount of what they've earned. They should probably cut him a check for 10% of what they've earned, almost like a mob payout. The same thing with LeBron. Those are the guys in the last 20 years in team sports have been just clearly better than everybody individually, and also making their teams better and making their teammates better.
Well, that's what elevates you to that like upper stratosphere, right? Is
exactly. You're
not putting up individual numbers, is that it's team success, and that you're making guys who really don't have a business being well known becoming really, really well known.
Exactly. That's what you need to do. And those two guys do that. And they still, are in the discussion as the best player in their particular sport, which is just mind blowing since the quarterback's 44.
Both might win MVP in their respective.
They could win MVP in their respective. Yeah, it's just silly. I mean, it really is. I mean, and they've been around forever. So I don't think he could do it as much, but I also don't know if the roster's constructed correctly for him to do that, to the point where he's like, why the hell am I going to pass to Russell Westbrook?
Which is partially his fault, right? I mean,
well, he look, if I'm going to give him compliments for constructing the roster in Miami, not so much in Miami because that was still
Cleveland, the second time in Cleveland.
Cleveland was him, and look, they won a title and went to 4 straight finals with him, and he did have Kyrie and Kevin Love, but at times he didn't have Kyrie and I'm going to give him credit for that. I'll even give credit to Davis to the Lakers. Then we've got to criticize him for getting Russell Westbrook to the Lakers because it has not worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, let's switch gears and really briefly touch on the Celtics, Sap, because I want to get to that trade thing that happened too. Celtics have won 3 in a row for just the second time this season. So that's their best win streak of the year. That's not a great win streak for anybody who's keeping track. 3 is not very impressive. Though I guess the one encouraging thing you can take from it is last night's game. They had the rare game where Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum both went for 30 plus. Brown had 34, Tatum had 33. They're now 6-0 in games where those guys score 30 plus each. So I said on my show last night, Sap, when I was doing the recap of the game, you can look at it one of 2 ways. Okay, we really feel strongly
that's in their career, right? That's not this year.
That's their career. No, that's their career. That's their career. That's what I'm saying. You can look at it 2 ways. You can look at it as, okay, this is why we want to build around these 2 guys. When they both play to their potential and both score 30 plus, we're undefeated. But I'd also say they've played together, 5 years now, and they've only done it 6 times. That's not great.
No, that's a great point. And the other thing too is, how do you get to 30 points? I mean, they could both get to 30 points if they want to take 30 shots. Now, the nice thing about last night is they were both 11 for 19 from the floor. That's outstanding. That's like 58% efficient. Jaylen Brown was 7 of 11 from 3. He was just lights out. Tatum was solid from 3. I mean, they put up some assists. They passed to each other. It looked really, really good. I think the common denominator there is, who didn't play last night is the player that I think the Celtics have to move on from. That's Marcus Smart. I still think I'm not going to compare him to Russell Westbrook of a guy that's in the way, but I do think he's in the way. So I would move on from him. And I think once that happens, that should Jayson Tatum just yet, because we see what these guys can do. Move on from Marcus Smart and see how that impacts those two players and the team. But the weird thing is they've done it 3 times this year. Now, they've played 24 games this year together, Jet, and they're 12-12 in those games. Amazingly, they're a 500 team, 21-21. When Brown and Tatum play together, they're 12-12. When it's just Tatum, no Brown, they're 7-7. When it's Brown, no Tatum, they're 2-2. They're like a 500 team, no matter how you
what.
slice it.
Put them on Jupiter, put them on Mars, put them in Boston.
Doesn't matter. They're a 500 team. But in 24 games, they've only each scored 30 in the same game 3 times. They're 3-0, which to me almost seems impossible, Jet, because Tatum's averaging 26 a game and Brown's averaging 25 a game. You would think by osmosis that would happen more often. So that's kind of concerning to me. And we know Kendrick Perkins tweeted that out last week. Like Jaylen Brown had a great game and Jayson Tatum was 6 for 14. And
then they got
Tatum
pissy.
reacted to the tweet. And before that, Brown had liked the tweet, which, would piss me off from Jayson Tatum. The only thing I can think to that is, and Perkins loves the Celtics and he wants to see these two guys do well. And maybe that was out there to see if it would galvanize these guys. And since that tweet, maybe it has. Maybe it does now. Brown and Tatum are closer, and it doesn't even have to be off the court. I don't know if they're friends on or off the court.
Who cares?
I think they probably are. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But I want to see how they mesh together on the court and look really good. Now, one other thing we got to mention: the last 2 games against Indiana, a team that's looks to be tanking. They're just god awful. So I want to see what they do tomorrow night when they play Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, that's a big game. If they can get to 4 straight wins, and if these two guys can continue to play at that level, then we can start to feel more positive about it. But I know, you've always been a Marcus Smart guy, but you're ready, willing, and able to move on from him. I think they have to move on from him so that now it really player who I find oftentimes is in the way.
Yeah, I've been a huge defender since I've known you of Marcus Smart, and I do think he can be valuable for the right team. But that's kind of what makes trading him a little tricky too, is that I don't think he's important to a team that's not a good team. I don't think he's helpful at all. To a team, like if he's on a team that's contending and, and making a serious playoff push, I think he can be a tremendous asset for them. The Celtics aren't in that place right now. It's the same as I don't think he's as good of a player as Draymond Green, but take Draymond Green as a comp. I don't think Draymond Green is helpful to a crap team. I think he's really helpful to a team like the Warriors. He's perfect.
Oh, the Celtics were loaded with these guys when they were 11 to 13 years, from Casey Jones to Satch Sanders, who were both in the Hall of Fame because they played for the Celtics, but they were defensive guys, role players. You put them on another team, no one would know much about them. Right. So, that's obviously what Marcus Smart can bring. Is he a guy, Chicago, Charlotte, I don't know, pick another team, Cleveland in the Eastern Conference, Memphis in the Western Conference. I don't know if that would work in LA. The Celtics aren't trading Marcus Smart to the Lakers. They'd assume just pay him and have him sit on the bench before they did something like that. But you get my point. Yeah, you're right. If he goes to a team and now he's coming off the bench and he's an energy guy who gives you 24 minutes a night, and, and maybe he kind of corrects himself because I think feels that he's been here longer than any other player. He was drafted by the Celtics. That, it's his team. Well, it's not. Those other 2 players are much better, and I want to see them become the leaders of the team. Marcus Smart's not really a leader. He's just not good enough a player. So from him, but it was good to see Tatum and Brown both playing really well together, the same game. Now I want to see it against better competition when they play Philadelphia tomorrow night in Philadelphia.
Yeah, their next 2 games are going to be much more telling. Philadelphia tomorrow night, and then the day after is against Chicago. You can tell if this is an actual turnaround or just a product of you play the Knicks without Evan Fournier and then the Pacers twice in a row.
Right.
I don't think you can read into this until you see them play at least a somewhat competent team, which Philadelphia is more than competent. They're a good team.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
All right, Sap. So there was a trade made today in the NBA. The Knicks and the Hawks completed a trade. Cam Reddish goes to the Knicks in exchange for Kevin Knox and Solomon Hill and a 2022 first round protected pick via the Charlotte Hornets that heads back to Atlanta. I think the question is, 1, why did the Hawks do this trade? And two, what's the Knicks end game here?
I think Atlanta did it because they have a glut of wing players, right? And they re-signed Kevin Huerter after a good playoff series last year against Philadelphia. Eventually, they're going to have to, pay some of their young players, and they couldn't pay them all, so they decided to move on. As far as the Knicks, the first thing that popped into my mind is they have RJ Barrett. Now they have Cam Reddish. Zion Williamson can't be fun, and then they're the trio that was at Duke 2019. They were all really close friends. We know Zion wants to play in New York. This might be the move that sets that possibility up. Now, obviously, you've got to trade a lot to get Zion from New Orleans to New York, but you want to hold on to Cam Reddish and RJ Barrett and really entice Zion to go to New York, because they, in addition to being three marvelous players, they're really good friends. So I think that's the first thing that popped into my mind, is that what the Knicks are trying to do. Now you're setting up all these pieces in hand. It's no different in the NFL. The Denver Broncos are interviewing the Green Bay Packers offensive coordinator and quarterback coach. Those guys in that they can get Aaron Rodgers. I think that's right. Something that maybe the Knicks are trying to do. Now you're going to have to give up a lot to get Zion, but draft picks, whatever else you have there, try to do it. And if Zion wants out of New Orleans at some point, New Orleans is just going to have to say, well, we're going to have to move on from him. That's the first thing that came to mind when I saw Cam Reddish going to the Knicks.
Yeah, as far as Zion goes, obviously he's a distressed asset right now. He hasn't seen the court. He seems to be way overweight, and he's not even rehabbing, within 2,000 miles of New Orleans right now. He's up in Portland. The only way I see him going to the Knicks in the near future, Sap, is if he does what has never happened before and declines that maximum rookie extension. If the Knicks want to pair those Duke guys all together, they're not going to be able to do it without him signing unless he signs there as a free agent, because otherwise the only reasonable trade chip they'd have to offer New Orleans is RJ Barrett. Yeah,
because he'd be there. I mean, Julius Randle's really good. An older guy,
he was already in New Orleans. I don't think they have.
He was already in New Orleans, and I think he's a guy who he had an incredible year last year, and he's kind of come back to earth this year. He's a good player, Julius Randle, but he's not a guy you're building your franchise around. Yeah, what else do they have? Evan Fournier. I mean, other than playing against the Celtics and destroying them, he's just okay. So maybe that's the thing, and that would be a year or two away, right? Because Zion's in his third year, so.
Yeah, I think they're just hoping that he declines it.
Which, I mean, it would cost him money, right? Like decline that offer then go sign a lot of money. But he probably looks at it. He's made a ton of money off of endorsements already, and he's probably figuring that would only grow in New York with the Knicks. Although you can make endorsement money playing anywhere. Maybe he just wants to play in New York. I mean, maybe that's why he wants to go there. I mean, the big thing with Zion is the weight. I mean, it's
well, that's what I was going to say, Sam. I think if he declines the option, it'll tell you that the weight and the foot thing are bullshit, and that he's just angling to get it, like that's under control, and he just doesn't want to play in New Orleans.
He's Ben Simmons
if he declines it.
Right. He's the likable version of Ben Simmons, because we love Zion, right? Who doesn't like Zion? And we kind of look at Ben Simmons like, that guy we don't like. Right. But
if he accepts the extension, Sap, I mean, I think that the foot injury is completely legitimate then. And then, and he has a hard time with it. But once that contract is put in front of him, they're going to offer him a maximum extension, regardless of this, if he sets foot on the court this year. Whatever he does with that is going to tell you where his mind is and what the deal is with the injury. Yep. If he accepts it, then the injury is, it's kind of twofold, right? If you're a Pelicans fan, you want him to be there. But if he accepts it, then you should also be concerned about the injury, because he's concerned about the injury if he accepts the contract. Yeah,
it's catch-22, damned if you do, damned if you don't. I'll use every other cliche you want.
Sure. No, it's not a good situation. It's not good.
It's not. And again, New Orleans had the first pick in 2019. They took Zion, which every other team in the league would have. And then Memphis ended up with Ja Morant, and we see what he's doing. And Memphis, the guy's an MVP candidate in his third year, and has become the most fine player in the league, right? Because it's new and fresh. and he's
Yeah.
doing things that just look abnormal.
He had a block the other night that looked like he was Superman. It was insane.
It was ridiculous. It looks like he was off on a pogo stick.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's just or coming off a trampoline. He's 6'2". His head was way over the rim. He caught the block and it was 3 feet over the. I was like,
yeah, like Bill Russell used to catch blocks, but except for Bill Russell, Bill Russell was 7 inches taller.
Right. I mean, I'm watching that go, and it looks like that Ja's playing on like an 8-foot rim. We compared him to Derrick Rose. And I think what he's done differently than those guys, I think he's more self-aware of his game, and he's become a better three-point shooter. And he's got great leadership ability. He's ballsy, he's afraid to, go at it with Steph Curry. Not go at it in terms of fights, but he's not backing down from Steph Curry. He's fantastic. But yeah, New Orleans got Zion, and Ja Morant goes to Memphis. And when Zion's played, he's a force, right? Greg Oden never even had a chance to play.
It could absolutely still work out for New Orleans.
Yeah. If he's again the foot issue, whatever else is going on with him is taken care of. He gets in shape and all of that. Then yeah, you've got a superstar. And New Orleans have played pretty well. They've been kind of surprising. I thought they would be without Zion in contention for the worst record in basketball, and they've kind of hung in there. Brandon Ingram's a nice player.
He's helped.
He's a nice player.
Yeah.
Another guy the Lakers moved on from to get Anthony Davis, and they won a championship. Yes, I get all that, but he's a pretty good player. He was the number 2 pick in the draft when he came out.
Yeah, and Zion was just a year ago was an all-star in his second season, which is not very common.
Fantastic. I mean, he was putting up numbers that were crazy. I mean, he was shooting 60% from the floor. He was doing everything you could ask from him. I mean, and again, we like him, right? So we hope that, he gets healthy, whether he stays in New Orleans or goes to New York, whatever, but we want to see him get healthy and be out there. But, if he is pulling something by just kind of going through the motions here to get out of New Orleans, it's no different than Ben Simmons, except again, we like Zion a lot. And Ben Simmons is someone who has turned into the most unlikable in the league. I mean, because he's just out.
Yeah, it's the same situation but different, right? So
that's a Yogi Berra statement.
Thank you.
But you're right though. But a lot of Yogi's statements were accurate. No one goes. I know what he was saying when he, what he meant when he said that. I mean, obviously, if you're no one's going to the restaurant, how would the restaurant be crowded? But Yogi, he was a deep thinker that we, also a Paisan, can't overlook that.
There you go.
Your statement was very Yogi Berra-esque, but truthful.
I appreciate that. And last thing, Sap, as far as the actual trade goes, without speculation of Zion, I think the Knicks did a great job. I think Cam Reddish has a lot of potential. They gave up nothing. So good for the Knicks.
Yeah. No, good. Again, that's going to only RJ Barrett, happy to get him extended. So now you've got 2 Dukies that are, I think,
he's shown really flashes good players this season. Reddish. He's had a couple of big games.
He's, I think, as a starter, averaged 18 a game. So yeah, I mean, again, when a lot of people think when those 3 guys went to Duke, that Reddish may have been the most talented, most naturally talented of the 3. So I mean, that's why I'm sure the Knicks would love to have Zion. That's not exactly a hot take on my part, but yeah, I think that may be the end game for them. But yeah, good move by the Knicks, getting another good player.
Well, what I remember, Sap, is that they always poll the rookies and say who's going to have the best career out of anybody in your draft class, and the most common answer was Zion, but second in that poll was Cam Reddish.
Right. Yeah.
Amongst his peers. So I mean, that goes to tell you that people think pretty highly of his game.
Yeah, because no one really. The only time we saw Ja Morant was in the tournament, right? I mean, I never really heard of him because
Murray State,
and if you're really a college basketball aficionado, which I know you are, you probably knew about him more so than I did. But then I'm watching the tournament, going, this guy is pretty spectacular. Just his passing ability is what really hit me, and now seeing all the other things he can do. So yeah, no, Cam Reddish is a player, as is RJ Barrett. I mean, I think the Knicks, got 2 guys right there that are good players, and if it can lead them to power to them.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's going to do it for us, Sap. We're going to be back tomorrow with talking about my least favorite player in the NBA, Kyrie Irving, as he's returned to the court and already generating headlines. So we'll talk about him. I'll try to not vomit while I do so. And check out the show, the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, wherever podcasts are found. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. Also, check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer, and we will be back tomorrow with a new edition of the podcast. See you, everybody.